Imagine for a moment a 7-year-old child who hasn't spoken a single word in 3 years, while the most expensive doctors in the country fail one after another. Now imagine that the person capable of giving that child back her voice is exactly the one everyone ignores, despises, and treats as invisible. This is the story of how a simple housekeeper accomplished what millions of dollars in treatments couldn't do, and how her silent wisdom forever transformed the life of one of America's most powerful families. In the imposing mansion of the Whitmore family in Beverly Hills, California, silence had become the loudest sound in the house. Federal Judge Dr. Benjamin Whitmore, 52 years old, was known for his strictness in the courtrooms and his fortune of over $50 million, but at home he faced a battle that money couldn't win. His daughter Emma, only 7 years old, hadn't spoken a single word since she was 4, when she tragically lost her mother in a car accident. The most renowned neurologists, the most expensive child psychiatrists, the most exclusive clinics in the country, all had failed to restore little Emma's voice. The judge, a man accustomed to solving everything with authority and financial resources, felt completely powerless in the face of his own daughter's silence. Working in this same mansion for just 6 months was Grace Washington, a 45-year-old black woman, widowed, mother of 3 children she raised alone while working as a housekeeper her entire life. Grace arrived every day at 6 in the morning, cleaned every corner of that house with care that went far beyond professional duty, and observed with the eyes of someone who deeply understood the pain of a wounded child. What nobody knew about Grace was that she possessed a special gift, an almost supernatural ability to understand nonverbal languages, especially from traumatized children. When she was young, she had worked as a volunteer at an orphanage where she learned to hear what children couldn't say, developing her own communication techniques that went far beyond words. Grace observed Emma every day, noticing every gesture, every look, every movement of the girl, as if she were reading an open book that only she could decipher. Dr. Benjamin, meanwhile, had become a bitter and distant man since his wife's death. Work at the courthouse was his refuge, where he could exercise absolute control, but at home he felt lost and incapable. He barely noticed Grace's presence, treating her with the typical indifference of someone who considers employees part of the furniture. To him, she was just another of the dozens of housekeepers who had passed through his house, hired and dismissed according to their efficiency in keeping everything impeccably clean and organized. If you haven't subscribed to our channel yet, this is the perfect moment to become part of this community that values real stories of transformation and justice. Click the subscribe button and hit the notification bell so you don't miss any of our emotional narratives. The routine continued this way until one Monday morning when Dr. Benjamin made a decision that would change everything forever. Tired of seeing his daughter wasting away in silence, he called an extraordinary meeting at his house. He invited the 5 most respected pediatric neurologists in the country, offering the astronomical sum of $10 million to whoever could make Emma speak again. The news spread through medical circles like wildfire. Dr. Richard Matthews, a neurologist famous for his arrogance and thirst for money, arrived at the mansion with his team, convinced it would be a simple task for someone of his caliber. "Judge Whitmore," he said with a conceited smile, "you can consider this case solved. With my revolutionary methods and international experience, your daughter will be speaking within weeks." The other doctors also showed confidence, each promising miraculous results in exchange for the offered fortune. Grace, who was serving coffee during the meeting, observed everything in silence. She had noticed something that all the specialists completely ignored. Emma wasn't present in the room during the doctor's presentation, but could be seen peeking from the stairs, and her little eyes showed a mixture of fear and sadness whenever one of the doctors spoke too loudly or gestured brusquely. Grace realized that the girl associated authoritative male voices with the trauma of losing her mother, as she had witnessed intense arguments between her parents before the fatal accident. Dr. Richard Matthews immediately took over the case, implementing a rigorous regime of daily sessions. His techniques involved aggressive visual stimuli, forced repetition exercises, and even small conditional rewards that looked more like animal training than humanized treatment. Emma, already emotionally fragile, began showing signs of even more severe anxiety. She started having nightmares, refused to eat properly, and developed a deep aversion to any adult who approached her authoritatively. Dr. Benjamin, desperate to see results, pressured Dr. Matthews even more, who in turn intensified the controversial methods, creating a vicious cycle of pressure and trauma. Grace watched all this with a broken heart. During her daily tasks, she tried to approach Emma subtly and respectfully. When cleaning the girl's room, she hummed softly lullabies she learned when caring for her own children. When organizing toys, she created small playful scenarios that told silent stories of hope and affection. Emma, initially suspicious, gradually began showing curiosity about Grace's small attentions. The housekeeper never forced interaction, never invaded the child's personal space, simply offered her warm and constant presence as a safe harbor amid the storm of aggressive treatments. 3 months passed, and Dr. Richard Matthews hadn't achieved any significant progress. On the contrary, Emma's emotional state had deteriorated dramatically. Dr. Benjamin, furious with the lack of results, fired Dr. Matthews and hired the second doctor on the list, Dr. Helen Rodriguez, a child psychiatrist who promised a more scientific and modern approach. Dr. Helen implemented a series of intensive psychological tests and experimental medications that left Emma even more withdrawn and apathetic. The girl began avoiding any eye contact, spent hours staring into space, and had lost interest even in her favorite dolls. It was during this dark period that Grace made a risky decision. She had observed that Emma showed subtle signs of communication that all the specialists completely ignored. The girl used complex body language, different finger positions to express basic needs, specific eye movements to indicate yes or no, and even a particular way of organizing her toys to express feelings. Grace began talking with Emma through this nonverbal language, responding to the girl's signals and creating new communication codes that only the two of them understood. The transformation was gradual but notable. Emma began smiling timidly when Grace entered the room, started eating better when the housekeeper was nearby, and even began playing more spontaneously during the hours when Grace worked on the upper floor of the house. Dr. Benjamin, absorbed in his frustrations with the medical treatments that continued failing, didn't notice these subtle but significant changes in his daughter's behavior. Dr. Helen Rodriguez, after 4 months of fruitless attempts, suggested that Emma be admitted to a clinic specializing in severe childhood psychiatric disorders. "Dr. Whitmore," she said during a particularly tense consultation, "your daughter presents a severe selective mutism condition associated with possible autism spectrum. I recommend immediate hospitalization for intensive treatment with controlled isolation." The suggestion left Dr. Benjamin desperate. The idea of separating from Emma, his only remaining family, was unbearable, but he was willing to make any sacrifice if it meant seeing his daughter recovered. It was at this critical moment that Grace Washington made the most courageous decision of her life. She knew that speaking out against the opinion of renowned doctors could cost her job, her only source of income to support her own children, but her conscience wouldn't allow her to remain silent while an innocent child was being sent for treatment she knew was inadequate. The night before Emma's scheduled hospitalization, Grace asked to speak with Dr. Benjamin privately. "If this story is touching your heart as much as it touched ours, show your support by leaving a like on this video. Your engagement helps us continue bringing real stories that inspire change and spread hope." "Dr. Benjamin," Grace said with a trembling but determined voice, "I know you might fire me for what I'm about to say, but I can't stay quiet. Emma doesn't need to be hospitalized. She's not sick the way the doctors think. She is communicating, yes, but in a way they can't see." Dr. Benjamin, initially irritated by a housekeeper's audacity in questioning renowned specialists, was about to dismiss her immediately when Grace continued, "Please, give me just 5 minutes with your daughter, in your presence, to show what she's really capable of doing." The judge, perhaps moved by desperation or a last spark of hope, agreed to the unusual request. Grace went up to Emma's room, followed closely by Dr. Benjamin, who skeptically observed every movement of the housekeeper. Grace knelt beside the bed where Emma was lying, staring fixedly at the ceiling, and began making small gestures with her hands, a language she had developed specifically to communicate with the girl. To Dr. Benjamin's absolute amazement, Emma immediately turned her attention to Grace and began responding with her own gestures, establishing a silent but clearly meaningful conversation between them. "Emma," Grace said with a soft and caring voice, "your daddy is here, and he's very worried about you. He thinks you can't speak, but I know you can. You don't speak because you're afraid. Isn't that right?" Emma looked directly at Grace and made an affirmative gesture with her head, the first clear sign of communication she had demonstrated in her father's presence in over a year. Dr. Benjamin felt tears welling up in his eyes as he realized his daughter was, in fact, communicating consciously and intentionally. Grace continued her careful approach. "You miss Mommy, and you're afraid that if you talk about her, you'll make Daddy sad too. Isn't that it?" Again, Emma confirmed with a nod. Grace then looked at Dr. Benjamin and said, "She needs to know it's safe to feel longing, that it's safe to talk about her mother, and especially that you won't get angry or sad if she expresses her feelings." Dr. Benjamin, completely overcome with emotion, approached the bed and, for the first time in years, truly saw his daughter not as a patient to be cured, but as a child who needed love and understanding. "Emma, my daughter," he said with a choked voice, "I'm so sorry for everything you've been through. I miss Mommy too, and it's okay if you want to talk about her with me. I won't get angry, I promise." It was then that the most extraordinary moment happened. Emma looked directly into her father's eyes and, with a weak but clear voice after 3 years of silence, whispered, "Daddy, I miss Mommy too." The words echoed through the room like a miracle. Dr. Benjamin, who had spent millions of dollars on sophisticated treatments, discovered that the key to healing his daughter lay in the compassionate heart of a housekeeper whom everyone considered insignificant. Grace had understood that Emma didn't suffer from any severe neurological disorder, but rather from deep emotional trauma that prevented her from expressing herself verbally for fear of causing more pain to the adults around her. Dr. Benjamin hugged his daughter for the first time in years while she continued to speak, timidly at first, but with growing confidence with each word pronounced. "I was afraid to talk about Mommy because you always got sad," Emma said. "But I want to tell you about the dreams I have with her, and I want you to tell me stories about when you were happy together." The dialogue between father and daughter, mediated by Grace's wisdom and sensitivity, revealed that the girl had developed an extraordinarily acute capacity for emotional perception, able to capture even the smallest signs of sadness or discomfort in the adults around her. The next morning, Dr. Richard Matthews arrived at the mansion for a final consultation, convinced he would be called to accompany Emma to the psychiatric clinic. He found, to his complete surprise, a completely transformed girl, chatting animatedly with her father about a storybook they were reading together. "This is impossible," Dr. Matthews muttered. "Yesterday she was completely non-responsive. What kind of medication did you administer?" Dr. Benjamin looked at Grace, who was discreetly organizing breakfast, and replied firmly, "No medication, doctor. What my daughter needed wasn't in any medical manual. She needed someone who knew how to listen not just with their ears, but with their heart." Dr. Richard Matthews, unable to accept that a simple housekeeper had achieved what he and his entire specialized team couldn't, reacted with arrogance and contempt. "Dr. Whitmore, you're being naive. This housekeeper obviously did some kind of charlatanism or inadequate psychological manipulation. Children with selective mutism don't heal overnight with little talks." Dr. Matthews' disrespectful response awakened something deep in Dr. Benjamin. For the first time, he clearly saw the arrogance and lack of humanity that had characterized all the treatments his daughter had received. "Dr. Matthews," he said with the authority of someone accustomed to dispensing justice in courtrooms, "you spent months trying to fix my daughter as if she were a broken machine, when in reality she just needed to be understood as a human being. Grace Washington accomplished in 5 minutes what you couldn't in months because she saw my daughter as a person, not as a clinical case." Dr. Matthews, furious at having his competence questioned publicly, especially in comparison to a housekeeper, completely lost his professional composure. "Dr. Whitmore, you're making a very serious mistake by trusting the opinion of a person without any medical training. This woman probably applied some kind of dubious technique that could have serious psychological consequences for your daughter. I'm going to report this case to the medical board and the competent authorities." The threat clearly revealed the doctor's petty and arrogant character, who preferred to attack a humble person rather than recognize his own professional limitations. It was at this moment of maximum tension that Dr. Benjamin made a decision that would change not only his life, but also his understanding of human value and social justice. He stood up, looked directly at Dr. Matthews, and declared, "Doctor, you can report whatever you want to whoever you want, but I know how to recognize competence and integrity when I see them. Grace Washington demonstrated more wisdom and effectiveness in one day than your entire team in months of expensive and useless treatment." Then he turned to Grace and, in front of everyone present, said something nobody expected. "Grace, I would like to offer you not only the $10 million I promised to the doctor who would cure my daughter, but also a full scholarship so you can formalize the extraordinary knowledge you already possess." The reaction was one of absolute shock. Dr. Matthews was livid with rage, unable to accept that a black housekeeper could be considered more valuable than him, a doctor trained at the country's best universities. "This is absurd," he shouted. "You're about to hand over a fortune to a person who has no formal qualifications, no diploma, no academic recognition." His prejudiced and elitist reaction revealed the true motivations behind his indignation. It wasn't a matter of professional competence, but rather not being able to stand seeing a poor black woman being valued above him. Grace, meanwhile, was completely stunned. Never in her life had she imagined she could receive such recognition for something she considered simply her compassionate human nature. "Dr. Benjamin," she said with tears in her eyes, I didn't do this thinking about money. I just saw a child suffering and couldn't stand still. But if you really want to help me, I accept the opportunity to study so I can help other children like Emma." Leave your comment below telling us what you thought of this incredible transformation. Do you know any similar stories of simple people who made a difference where specialists failed? We want to hear your opinion and your own experiences. Dr. Benjamin, who had spent years of his professional life judging people and situations in courtrooms, experienced for the first time what it meant to be truly just in his personal life. He realized he had spent years valuing titles, diplomas, and social status, while completely ignoring fundamental human qualities like empathy, intuition, and practical wisdom. "Grace," he said with deep sincerity, "you taught me that a person's true value isn't in their diplomas or bank account, but in their ability to see and heal others' pain." The transformation in Grace's life was extraordinary, but she remained always humble and focused on what really mattered. With the resources provided by Dr. Benjamin, she began studying psychology with a specialization in child therapy, discovering that her natural intuitions had solid scientific foundation and could be improved with formal knowledge. She also began working part-time at a center for traumatized children, where her innovative nonverbal communication techniques quickly gained recognition among other professionals in the field. Emma, meanwhile, flourished impressively. With the trauma finally processed appropriately and communication re-established with her father, she not only returned to speaking normally, but developed remarkable emotional maturity for her age. She became extremely close to Grace, considering her a second mother, and frequently asked to accompany Grace on her visits to the child care center, where she demonstrated extraordinary natural empathy with other vulnerable children. Dr. Benjamin underwent a profound personal transformation that was also reflected in his professional career. In the courtrooms, he began paying more attention to the human stories behind cases, especially when involving people from less favored social classes. He began questioning more frequently whether he was applying true justice or just following bureaucratic protocols. His experience with Grace and Emma led him to create a social program within the judicial system to identify and support natural talents in underprivileged communities, offering scholarships and development opportunities for people who, like Grace, possessed extraordinary wisdom and competence, but never had access to formal education. Dr. Richard Matthews, unable to accept his professional and personal defeat, tried to sue Dr. Benjamin for irregular medical practice and Grace for illegal practice of medicine. However, his defamatory campaign ended up backfiring when other patients began reporting similar cases of inadequate treatments and lack of human sensitivity. The medical board opened an investigation into his questionable methods, and Dr. Matthews ended up losing several important clients who preferred to seek more humanized and effective professionals. 6 months after the events that changed their lives, Dr. Benjamin organized a special birthday party for Emma, not just to celebrate her 8 years, but mainly to celebrate her emotional and vocal rebirth. The party brought together families of Emma's school friends, some neighbors, and, of course, Grace with her 3 children, who were received as family members. Emma, radiant and talkative, made sure to introduce Grace to all the guests as the most special person in the world, who taught me that it's possible to speak with the heart even when words don't come out of the mouth. During his speech at the party, Dr. Benjamin reflected publicly on the lessons he had learned. I spent millions of dollars looking for a cure for my daughter in the wrong places, when the answer was right before my eyes every day. I learned that true competence doesn't necessarily come from diplomas or certificates, but from the ability to see, understand, and genuinely connect with others suffering. Grace Washington not only gave my daughter back her voice, she taught me to listen with my heart. Grace, who had spent her entire life being invisible to the families where she worked, now found herself at the center of a transformation that went far beyond her own story. She had become a living example that wisdom and competence can flourish anywhere, regardless of social origin or academic training. More than that, her story began inspiring changes in how the medical community itself viewed the importance of human sensitivity in the healing process. The relationship between Dr. Benjamin and Grace evolved into a deep friendship based on mutual respect and sincere admiration. He became not only her financial benefactor, but also her academic mentor, helping her navigate the university world and offering professional connections that accelerated her career in child therapy. Grace, in turn, continued being a constant and stabilizing presence in Emma's life, offering the caring maternal perspective that the girl had lost so early. 1 year after the episode that changed everything, Grace Washington graduated as a child psychologist with honors and opened her own clinic specialized in traumatized children, using a revolutionary approach that combined traditional academic techniques with the intuitive nonverbal communication methods she had developed naturally. Her clinic quickly became a national reference, and she began being invited to speak at universities and medical conferences, always emphasizing that technical knowledge must always be accompanied by genuine human compassion. Dr. Benjamin, inspired by the personal and professional transformation he had experienced, decided to use his privileged position in the judicial system to promote broader social changes. He created a foundation focused on identifying and developing natural talents in underprivileged communities, offering not only scholarships but also personalized mentorship and networking opportunities that were traditionally only available to people from higher social classes. The foundation quickly became a model for other similar initiatives throughout the country. Emma grew up to become an exceptionally empathetic and articulate child, with deep understanding about trauma, healing, and the importance of valuing people for their natural gifts instead of their social credentials. At 10 years old, she already showed interest in following Grace's footsteps, expressing the desire to work with children who go through difficulties similar to those she had faced. Her experience had made her extraordinarily sensitive to others' emotional needs, transforming her original trauma into a source of strength and purpose. The story of how a housekeeper managed to heal what millionaire doctors couldn't spread far beyond Dr. Benjamin's social circles, inspiring important discussions about social prejudice, true human value, and the need to recognize competence regardless of origin or formal training. National newspapers covered the story. Universities used it as a case study about the importance of empathy in medical practice, and social organizations cited it as an example of how extraordinary talents can be hidden in the most unlikely places. Dr. Richard Matthews, confronted with undeniable evidence that he had been surpassed by someone he considered inferior, was eventually forced to reevaluate his own practices and prejudices. Although initially resistant, he ended up seeking grace for a private conversation, where he admitted his professional and personal failures, asked forgiveness for the disrespectful treatment he had given her and Emma, and expressed desire to learn from the methods she had developed. Grace, true to her compassionate nature, not only forgave Dr. Matthews, but offered guidance so he could incorporate more human sensitivity into his medical practice. This story teaches us that a person's true value cannot be measured by academic titles, social position, or material wealth, but by the ability to see, understand, and heal others' pain. Grace Washington proved that genuine wisdom and extraordinary competence can flourish anywhere, and that sometimes the most effective solutions to our most complex problems come from the most unexpected sources. More importantly, she demonstrated that when we truly value human talent, regardless of its origin, we create opportunities for transformations that benefit not just individuals, but entire societies. Humility defeated arrogance, compassion overcame prejudice, and true justice prevailed over superficial appearances. Dr. Benjamin learned that being truly just means recognizing and rewarding merit wherever it manifests, while Emma discovered that her voice had value not only when she spoke, but also when she listened with an open heart. And Grace Washington, who began this journey as an invisible housekeeper, became a beacon of hope and a living example that we all possess unique gifts that, when properly recognized and valued, have the power to transform the world around us. If this story touched your heart and made you reflect on how you value the people around you, subscribe to our channel for more inspiring narratives that celebrate the victory of justice, compassion, and recognition of true human value. Share this video with someone who needs to be reminded that we all have the power to make a difference in others' lives, regardless of our social position or academic training.